It's time now for Positive Professor Karol Sikora. And Karol, I know you, like many, are concerned about the push for 12 to 15-year-olds to receive COVID jabs, despite the Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunisation recommending against the move. We were discussing this earlier in the show, but what's your take?
My take is that 12 to 15-year-olds who are healthy, have no vulnerability, just normal children, shouldn't all be immunised. The 16-year-olds, the risk-balance ratio comes into play, and it's probably worth doing. But under 15 or under 16, it probably isn't. And, the only exception possibly could be a child from a large family where there are older people living in the same house. I mean, Dan, if you think about it, what the vaccination program does is reduce the infection rate. It also reduces the hospitalization, the ventilation, and the death rate. And it probably reduces transmission. But, hospitalization is so rare for children that the potential risk of vaccination really outweighs the benefit for them. And it becomes a difficult ethical dilemma. Do you want to immunize everybody, not for their own sake, but for the whole of society? Yeah? That's a dangerous way to go.
So, Karol, tell me about the JCVI, because I'm so confused that for months and months and months, the government said, we have to do what the JCVI tell us to do. Remember when they were deciding which age groups were going to get the vaccine first, where the key workers were going to get the vaccine before particular age groups? The government said all of the decisions had to be made by the JCVI because they weren't political and they were making the correct scientific decisions. All of a sudden, when they now say, actually, no, there aren't overwhelming health benefits, we don't recommend a rollout to all 12 to 15-year-olds, the government seems to want to overturn the decision. I don't get that. What's it about?
No, it's all about the way politics and science interact. So the government and perhaps the chief medical officers of the 4 countries of the UK who now have the final decision to make, do they take on board the science committee, the JCVI, eminent immunologists, virologists, and so on? And they decided not to go ahead with it. There was a little bit of subterfuge when they said, well, we won't go ahead till all the adults have had their booster because we can't overload the vaccination system. But that was a little bit of a cop-out. In reality, they said just at the end of last week on Friday, we don't recommend it. Now, the politicians can overrule that. But once you do that, the whole power of the media is lost. I mean, why would parents want to do it? I mean, I've got grandchildren, they're not quite 12 yet, but, I would say to my kids, don't immunize your children because at that age group, as long as they're healthy. That's the key, Dan.
It seems that the government is almost in a race with these other nations like Israel and Australia that actually don't just want to jab the over 12s, they want to jab the over 5-year-olds. But actually, I would say we don't just have to copy and ape what the other countries are doing. It could be an interesting experiment, actually, to hold firm, and then we can compare as well what happens. Because if these kids are getting natural immunity from COVID being passed around schools, that's probably actually better in the long term, right, than immunity from the vaccine, which isn't, we know now scientifically, isn't as effective. It doesn't last as long. It doesn't stop the transmission in the same way. It doesn't reduce the viral load in the same way.
And there's clear data, as you say, in the literature published in the last few weeks, comparing immunity acquired naturally with immunity with vaccination. And there's no doubt the immunity with natural immunity to the virus lasts longer and is more powerful. The real problem in this whole business is how compulsory do you make it? So at one extreme, you say, if you don't have a vaccination, the child can't come to school. At the other end, you say, it's your choice. You can all do what you like. And then there's various bits in the middle. I think going down a compulsory route is very dangerous for children.
I also think this is really dangerous territory for the government, don't you, Karol? Because if they're going to overrule the science in this case, how can we ever trust them again when they tell us that they're following the science?
I think the damage is done, Dan, if you're trying to run a vaccination campaign for children. I've heard the JCVI saying that it's probably not worth doing. And then if the government try and force it, a lot of parents are going to say, well, your scientists didn't agree. Why are you doing this to our children? And that's going to be the problem. It's a bizarre sort of small part, because we had the older people first, then we had the middle-aged, then we had people to 18, then we went down to 16. And you're right. What happens after this? Do you go down to 5? Do you go down to 2? Where does it all end? Children don't get influenza vaccine each year for the very reason that influenza in children is a relatively mild illness. A few exceptions, but on the whole, a relatively mild illness. So it's clear that going with the science is absolutely vital throughout this. And not, as you say, don't compare with other countries. No one knows what's right and what's wrong. All we can do is take the evidence, synthesize it, and come out with a conclusion that we can all sign up to.
Well, Karol, I'm completely with you, but I want to bring in my superstar panel now. It's Carol Malone, Benjamin Butterworth and Dominique Samuels tonight, because we've already had quite a heated debate on this issue earlier in the hour. Benjamin, why is Carol wrong?
Well, actually, I think, Professor, you've made a very good point about...
You disagree with him?
Well, I mean, I sort of agree, sort of disagree. That's the kind of nuance you get.
Because you want 12 to 15-year-olds to be jabbed.
But you made a very good point about some 12 to 15-year-olds that should be jabbed, and that was that they might live in a big family, they might be being raised with relatives that are in a vulnerable category who are older. And so, would you agree with me that it would be wrong of the government to stop those young people getting vaccinated, and that it should be an option for them at the very least, because of the examples you give? Now, a government could never specify who lived in those homes. That'd be far too complicated. What they should say is if you want the jab in that category and your parents agree, you should be allowed to.
Carol, how do you respond to that?
I would agree. I think that's a reasonable way to do it. But making things compulsory and allowing the school to insist on vaccination for that age group is not right. Parents and child should be allowed to make a decision. And, the 15-year-olds can make their own decision, but the parents are responsible for them, so they have to be part of the consent process, I guess. But the compulsoriness of it would be wrong for this age group. I mean, we're not compulsorily immunising the over 70-year-olds. So why would you do it for this? But if those want it, if people live in special circumstances socially, of course they should be able to have it on the NHS.
Carol Malone?
Yeah, Carol, hi.
Hi, Carol.
I listened to what you said before about, we don't force kids to have flu jabs, but we do strongly advise parents to get their kids the, measles, mumps, rubella, MMR. We strongly advise them to do that. And there was a big fuss a few years ago, you will remember, about kids getting those jabs. There was a suggestion by one person, which has been disproved, that they might trigger autism. So, there's always been a problem with parents and jabs, but do you not think that it's not so much that they're healthy kids and they don't need it? The thing is, if they get it in school, the schools will close. There will be a form of lockdown. They will be sent home. So do you not think it's worth the 12 to 16-year-olds having it, bearing in mind the UK medical regulators have declared it safe? Do you not think there's an argument for letting kids who want to have it, have it?
Certainly, that's a very valid argument, Carol. But the problem with that is that, you're essentially going to have to make it compulsory for that to take place. I mean, the JCVI, what they do, they look at the risks of vaccination and the risks of having COVID, including long COVID, and they come to a conclusion. And the balance for the 16-year-olds and up was clear. The balance was better with vaccination. But below 16, it's not clear. And the committee decided not to recommend it. It was a little bit surprising, perhaps, to some of us observers, because, as you know, I'm not an infectious person, I'm a cancer person. So, I was very surprised that they came up with that. The problem with the whole area is that everyone's now an expert on COVID. Everybody's an expert, including Dan, of course, himself. And it's frightening how much...
Carol, I wish I didn't have to be. I wish I didn't have to be. My God. But Dominique, the problem is we have been... Over many months, we've learned that some officials want to bamboozle us with science, which isn't always accurate. So we've had to become experts, all of us, haven't we, to make advanced decisions for ourselves.
I think that's...
know. And the other two features, a lot of fake news out there, as you know. And the other thing is the power of Twitter, where if you say something people don't like, they come and sit on you on Twitter, metaphorically, and be completely obnoxious to you. And I'm sure the panel have had that experience.
Well, Dominique, you come in here
tonight from the anti-vaxxers, or even the pro-vaxxers. I'll probably get it tonight. In the past, I've had it from the anti-vaxxers. So we're used to that sort of thing.
Oh, just in response to what you said before, I think that's completely right, because I feel like we get a really one-sided view of the science, and scientists rarely universally agree on anything, and there definitely hasn't been universal agreement on the efficacy of vaccinating 12 to 15-year-olds, the efficacy of lockdowns and the measures that we've taken. And for me personally, I regularly get, oh, well, you're not a scientist. But the thing is, the things that I'm espousing, they're from, other scientists and studies that, are out there. It's just that they don't regularly get heard. So, why do you think that is?
I think it's the way committees work. Committee structures, where you get 20 people. The JCVI is about 20, 25 people. They don't all turn up at once. So let's say there are 20 people in the room. They all want to go home at the end of the day. They can't argue all afternoon or all evening into the night. They've got to come to a conclusion. And so on the whole, the dynamics is such that the stronger voices, those that feel more strongly, tend to win through and drag the others along with them. It's a bizarre feature of all committees in science, where the answer is it's not clear at the start. So you have all the evidence, you do some sort of analysis, and then you come to a conclusion. But those that perhaps shout the most tend to win the day. And that's why I really thought they were going to recommend childhood vaccination.
Well, we know, and also, Karol, I think you're completely right. Fascinating insight. But we know where the media's at. They want to jab. They want to jab at any cost. And even if you, like Dominique or like yourself, add some nuance to the argument, very often you're branded an anti-vaxxer, which I think actually stamps out debate. And that's really, really worrying, because these are big decisions. We have to have the debate. And that's what we'll continue to do here on Tonight Live. Welcome to the GB News YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows, and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.